Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX141 Walsh, welcoming you to an all new World of Warships gameplay today on our channel. In this episode we're setting sail in the Tier 8 American battleship known as the North Carolina, in a Tier 10 domination game on the map Hotspot. Sailing with our good friend Z, the purpose of today's gameplay is for us to articulate our approach to those games where we're the bottom tier and the bottom tier ships are in a small number, where there's approximately 3 Tier 8s aside and there's 5 Tier 10s aside for reference. Now the safest bet, what I typically do, would be to sail with the main fleet, particularly the Tier 10s, and try to make a play off of the actions of my teammates, thereby mutually supporting them and hoping to receive some support from them and gradually whittle the enemy team down. But sometimes, as what you're going to see in today's game, it's sometimes better to look at the bigger picture and try to provide your team with the ability to attack the enemy team from 2 sides rather than 1. Now to do this, Z and I have realised that Objective Bravo is going to be important, because he who controls the centre controls the ability to attack in 3 different directions for their team. Whether we want to attack into the enemy spawn by going north, attack west into Alpha, or attack east into Charlie. So Z's making his way in his stealthy Tier 8 Japanese destroyer known as the Kagero towards Bravo. But Z's also inferred to me one key bit of knowledge. He's not running a full concealment build because he doesn't have concealment expert on his captain, which means the American destroyers, particularly the Tier 9 Fletcher on the enemy team, will be able to chase down Z with relative ease in terms of concealment matching, as I believe the Fletcher of a full concealment build is able to see the Kagero before the Kagero can see it, i.e. Z's Kagero in particular. So what we're going to do is use Z's presence in Bravo to interrupt the potential cap by the enemy destroyers, and as they make their way in and spot Z, they'll open fire of their 5-inch guns, and Z will just have to kite that fire until he gets to a sufficient distance where the low muzzle velocity of the 5-inch guns becomes quite easily avoidable, and then we can return fire of our own ship, and our team will hopefully do the same and do the damage to get rid of that enemy destroyer, or at least push it away. In the meantime, we'll use Z spotting of the enemy fleet who are making their way towards Objective Alpha as their primary objective by looks of things, in order to do a good amount of damage. We started off with 18,000 on the gross occur first, and unfortunately we provided way too much lead for that enemy Admiral Hipper. But we can see the enemy Fletcher has been spotted and Z is conducting his retreat at this point. The Fletcher opening fire continuously with the 5-inch guns as predicted, trying to make mincemeat of Z's ship, and as he pulls the distance, the accuracy of the Fletcher salvos decreases proportionally. In return, we can see that enemy Fletcher is being focused by our team. And if you're wondering why I'm not turning my guns towards it, I want to exploit the broadside that the enemy Hipper is providing. Rather than focus on one enemy ship that's pretty much almost out of the game, let's also do some damage to another ship that can make a difference over the course of the game, that being the Admiral Hipper. It looks a reasonable salvo. Will it do any damage? Well, 1 Citadel and an over penetration, so that's approximately 14,000 damage, with Citadel's armed piercing in the North Carolina per shell doing 13,100. Now in return we can see that the enemy Fletcher is down to 905 health. Their role in this game is much more constrained than their opening role, whereby when they've got health they can do a lot more. And in return that means they're retreating all the way up into the northwest corner of the map, and Z can capture Bravo without hindrance. Now it's at this point that we need to take a step back and ask ourselves what's happening in the general theme of the match. And what we can see on the mini-map in the bottom right hand corner of our screen is that both teams are really pushing Objective Alpha. 66% of each team is going towards that objective, it looks like. Or in the enemy's case, we could say it's more than that, with 10 ships going that way and only 2 towards Objective Charlie. Now Z finishing off capturing Bravo and us making our way forward, what we must realise now is that if we can take Charlie, we can pin the enemy team to a single objective and essentially encircle them or push them into a corner. So what we're going to do is turn the balance of the contest at Objective Charlie into our team's favour. Because we can see it's equal, 2 cruisers going at it, our Des Moines and Ibuki versus the enemy Des Moines and an enemy Minotaur. As we drop a salvo onto the enemy Amagi over in the west, we are going to drift our way forward. Now I say drift because what you'll note in the bottom left hand corner of your screen is that I'm going to be constantly changing up my velocity, whereby I'll be going up to roughly a half to a 3/4 speed, and then I'll be dropping back down to a quarter, sometimes going to a near stop and then going forward once again. In return I am exposing a large chunk of broadside westwards because I want to provide an inviting target for the enemy battleships over in the west to shoot at. Now I'm not saying that the distance between our ships of approximately 18 to 20 kilometres is going to cause those shells to miss. I'm expecting penetrations to go in and perhaps the occasional citadel, but I want the enemy battleships in the west to become distracted by my gleaming prize of a shot, and in return I can bring all 3 of my guns to bear on the enemy ships over in the east, i.e. these 2 cruisers at Charlie. And that puts the Des Moines and the Minotaur in a very awkward position, because how do they react to the fact they're being shot from the south and being shot from the west? Whereby they've got to expose a broadside to one of the two parties shooting at them, and that costs the Des Moines its health, and now we're going to do the same to the Minotaur hopefully. Using our spotter aircraft to be able to see over the landmass at a better angle to try and approximate when to fire our salvo and where to aim it, to try and get citadels or at least penetrations on that rather fragile British cruiser. Now in the meantime we are continuously being spotted. As we can see, there's enemy ships in Objective Alpha that can see us apart from when rocks drift into our path, and when we open fire our detectability only increases, with the maximal range of our guns at this point with the spotter aircraft going up to 27.9 kilometers compared to the base 23.3 kilometers when your ship is fully upgraded. We dealt a good amount of damage to the Minotaur there, no citadels but 8,500 approximately knocked off, and it causes the Minotaur to have to activate while they're heals. As they continue to reverse, life's getting more and more awkward for them, because as they go back they continue to expose a broadside and we can continue to try and punish them. Perhaps we're aiming a little bit too high on reflection, but at least we're going to be doing some damage to this enemy cruiser. And in return, Z's moving up to try and flank it with torpedoes as we knock off another 11,000, and we can see that the Minotaur is going to start reacting by going forward towards our cruisers, who are really gaining the upper hand and trying to take Charlie now. And as we can see, whilst the contest is going on over in Alpha, and we're occasionally receiving a salvo from one of the enemy battleships, or perhaps a couple of the enemy battleships, Charlie is now taken, and it means we can start to turn our attention to punishing those who would shoot at us, starting with this enemy Montana who seems to be adamant that they want to put some damage in. And here we will take in a good amount of damage, despite the fact we start angling in, but we should expect that, and we lose 10,000 health. But, as we always say, there is no reward without risk, and we're having to absorb the risk here. In return, we can start to turn towards this enemy battleship, the Tier 10, and start to ruin their day. Now one thing to note about the configuration in North Carolina, 66% of your firepower is based towards the front of the ship. You have an ABX configuration, whereby you have 9 guns in total, 3 to each turret, and these are 16-inch guns. And the wonderful armour-piercing shells will make short work of enemy battleships, giving you broadside, but more on that with the Montana a bit later on. In the meantime, I'm immediately turning my attention towards the enemy Benson now, because I know Z wants to go towards Alpha, and what's the most important thing for my friendly Japanese destroyer? I have to get rid of the destroyer hunter. So as we open fire on the broadside in Benson, they've got their side to us, our armour piercing does very well at dealing roughly 11,000 damage to that Benson, and that means with the Benson now on approximately the same health as Z's Kagero, if Z can keep the gunfight to longer distances, then he's not going to have a problem in defeating that Benson. As we can see, the Benson is being whittled down, they seem to be in a rather precarious position, and it means we can now focus on the enemy Montana, who's moved so far up they had to expose broadside to us, otherwise they'll pretty much beach themselves, and we can start to just tear into them, shell after shell, as we take some hits on the enemy Amagi up in the northwest, but take no major damage. In our opening salvo, we pick up a Citadel and 2 penetrations, and we're hoping to get that Montana out of the game. They seem to be in a very low health state, ideal for our guns. And the reason I say a low health state is because when you give that much broadside and you aim for those rearmost turrets, the armour piercing shells will Citadel very nicely, and we're just lining up the shot as they start to reverse. Here we go. A very nice amount of dispersion there, 2 Citadels and 2 penetrations, and that being due to the fact that we have 2.0 Sigma on the North Carolina's guns, meaning that they have wonderful dispersion with increasing range. And now it's just a case of following enemy ships as they retreat, because the game is pretty much over. We can see that whilst we have not carried the match for our team, the most important part is the fact that we perhaps made a little bit of a difference and perhaps tipped the balance in our team's favour when it was looking quite equal over on Objective Alpha. We freed up our ships on Objective Charlie and we started to push in from the unexpected central flank. We open up on the enemy Amagi, unfortunately only pick up 1 over penetration there, but perhaps we'll remedy it in our next salvo, and Z's making his way in towards Objective Alpha to help capture it, and he's going to start making his way northwestwards to try and torpedo these enemy ships. And there's a funny story about Z's game which we'll talk about in the post-game stats. Now, can we get the Amagi out of the game? They seem to be on a rather low amount of health, so we shouldn't need too many penetrations here. Coming down to roughly 10,000 health, looks good. And there we go, 12,000 damage and an Amagi eliminated, our Tier 8 Japanese counterpart. And whilst we would like to put some shells into the enemy Admiral Hipper, we're going to see with the scores being so low, the Missouri is going to fall and that'll be the end of the game. and it'll be time to take a look at the post-game stats as we just zoom in to try and get the lead. A rather clean victory in all. We can see that our battle performance amounted to a total of 159,130 damage. Coming on to the team scores, we can see that we topped our team in terms of base experience earned, picking up 2,166. This was due to our ability to exploit the broadsides of the enemy ships which were presented to us for our rather unexpected position in the centre of the map, whereby the opponents either had to turn towards us and expose their broadsides to our fleet in the south, or alternatively keep defending themselves against the presence in the south, particularly around Objective Alpha, and keep the broadside pointed towards us. The funny item to note here is how low is he placed on the team sheet, whereby with his 1082 base experience, it should be realised that he accumulated this for approximately 70,000 HP of spotting damage and a single solo capture on Objective Bravo. He did not hit with a single shell from his artillery pieces or with a single torpedo throughout this match, and that goes to highlight that sometimes you can be a very valuable destroyer to your team through simply taking the objectives and providing vision. It's not always about artillery shells and torpedoes, just some of the time. Coming on to our detailed report, we have one key item to note here, and that is the duration of the battle, a total of 9 minutes and 17 seconds. Now some may be thinking that this game was very short based on how it started, particularly in the opening couple of minutes, whereby if you looked at the minimap you would have thought perhaps this was going to be a bit of a slugfest, with both fleets prioritising Objective Alpha and smaller contingents prioritising Objective Charlie, meaning that the fleets over time would have ground themselves down and there'd be a couple of ships left standing. But because we decided to commit to a different side of the map, we actually went down the centre and were able to provide that flanking fire into both Objective Charlie and Objective Alpha in turn. It meant that we were able to help break the deadlocks over the objective faster and make the game conclude a lot faster than perhaps anticipated. And finally, coming on to our credits and experience earned, we can see that after additions and deductions, we walked away with 180,136 silver credits and 15,434 commander experience. To conclude, hopefully today we have demonstrated how despite being the bottom tier ship in a rather unfavourable game in terms of matchmaking, we were able to make a considerable difference in terms of our team picking up the victory. We assessed the bigger picture of our team and the enemy team, whereby both teams went towards a particular objective, Objective Alpha, and sent smaller contingents to another objective, Objective Charlie, meaning that the centre of the map was open and available for us to make our play. We played it cautiously at first and exploited it to a full advantage, and we saw that as time went on, we were able to whittle down the enemy fleet, mutually benefiting our teammates who were already doing so through the overall gauntlets they had to run around the Alpha and Charlie objectives. In turn, we can't say that we were the one who carried the team to victory, but what we can say is we helped tip the balance in our team's favour, and sometimes that's all the bottom tier ship needs to do in order to enable her team to win the day. And so I've been TX141, and if you have enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future World of Warships videos on my channel. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care and fair seas.